solution with a whole lot of truth. The remedy revolution is here for you. Ooh. And now here's your host, Erin Page.
Welcome to The Revolution. My name is Erin, and this is our very first guest since the name change, Dr. Jim Meehan. Dr. Jim has been on the podcast before, and we were talking about something very different. So this time we're going to be talking about hormones, which I know is something very near and dear to you from a personal standpoint. And also to myself. I work a lot with women who are struggling with hormone issues in general. And I really think that, having this conversation is going to be very beneficial to so many of our listeners. Dr. Meehan is in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and he started out as an ophthalmologist. So I have to ask, how did you get into hormones? What was that all about?
Well, divine kind of providence type things for sure. So I went into ophthalmology probably, as a medical student. I wanted to go into a specialty that was, had all ophthalmology is one of the elite subspecialties in medicine. It's a specialty that allows us to do a mix of surgery and medical patient care. But I was just doing surgeries all the time. Most of my patients were under the effects of anesthesia or sedated, and I like the interaction, getting to know them getting to hear about our kids and what our kids are doing, that type of thing. And more than anything else, though, Erin, I was really frustrated by a medical system that paid me a great deal of money to treat the end stages of disease, a diabetic retina, treating it with a laser, but nothing to prevent it. And so, about 5-6 years into my my medical practice, I just pivoted. I pivoted because I wanted to prevent disease. I wanted to focus on the things that I thought matter, teaching people how to, change the food they're eating, avoid the toxins that are polluting and poisoning our food, how to move and exercise and enjoy it. And also in that process, I think a part of my menopause, I was going through my own medical condition that I didn't fully understand at the time. I just knew that I was, tired all the time, wasn't happy with anything that I was doing. And it wouldn't have mattered probably what I was doing at the time. I was just going through a time in which my hormones were so low. My mom had more testosterone than I did, probably. I had been a high level elite athlete, had always been, a lean, mean fighting machine, and, martial artist, middle linebacker, fullback, played college baseball. And here I found myself overweight, inflamed, miserable, depressed. I go to the medical doctor and I get a pill for every one of those symptoms. Got side effects from everyone. I mean, I was literally put on a statin, a blood pressure medicine, a weight loss medicine, an antidepressant, depressant, Prozac. Got, negative side effects from every one of them. Just felt worse. And I finally found a doctor that would, I started, doing my own research and said, I need to get my hormones checked. I mean, I check all the boxes, and finally did get a lab test and found this serious deficiency across the board. I damaged my pituitary gland from all of the times that I rammed my helmet into a middle linebacker or, martial artist, punched and kicked in the face and head more times than I can remember. And that had traumatized the pituitary gland, which controls all of your hormones. Very common, situation, by the way. Men and women in athletics might, if you're in cheer and your daughter's one of those, the flyers or, the lifters, how many times have they, kind of seen stars from a head injury?
And our boys, actually.
Yeah, right. And especially when they're young. I mean, that little pituitary gland is hanging there like a little punching bag in a bony protected part of the skull until, there's a major acceleration, deceleration injury that slams that little punching bag, that delicate gland into that bony protective wall and traumatizes it. And if that happens significantly or enough, it can be enough to shut down that gland's ability to control your sex hormones, your thyroid, your growth hormone, etc. So I found myself at that place in life. And honestly, it was a dark time for me. I thought all the best years were behind me. I was very depressed. I was grumpy all the time. I was tired all the time. Those are the two, clear, first questions that I ask, or I hear patients say when they have a hormone deficiency. And getting it diagnosed and then finding a doctor that could do a reasonably good job back then, this is 25 some odd years ago, in treating that issue, which we're not well trained in medicine for, not even in endocrinology. In fact, I train a lot of doctors in how to do bioidentical, biorhythmic, transdermal hormone replacement therapy. And I find they know more about, antidepressants than they do anything to do with hormones, all classes, endocrinologists. I mean, it's not profitable. And that's really the big issue here is natural hormones, which are the only type that you should be getting, not these patented aberrations of synthetic versions of our hormones, ethanol, estradiol, or, Premarin, which was from pregnant mare urine. It was another species of estrogen that women were given in the 1990s and early 2000s. But when you give natural hormones, natural substances in the body can't be patented. So there's just no interest. And my profession is a profession that works for pharma. They don't like, they don't say that outright, but we're brainwashed and indoctrinated, to do that pill for every ill, sick care system that was designed by the Rockefellers. And I just saw that system failing, not only, me as a doctor and my patients, but failing me as a patient. And I set out to just do something better, get more training, more, something more than the 2.5 weeks that we spent in nutrition training and medical school. The inadequate, the over focus on, pharmaceutical interventions and such. And so lots of training. I mean, my blessing, my curse is I'm curious. I want to know deeply, and I try to understand everything that I can. And I had such a transformation in my health. I mean, Erin, it was from, serious depression to the point where I'm a follower of Christ. I wouldn't have taken my life, but, the thoughts were kind of there. In fact, my approach to it was, I'm going to rejoin the military. I'd been a West Point cadet, and, I thought, I'm going to rejoin the military. So, I mean, if I go out fighting on my feet for something, meaningful, which back then I realized it's not meaningful what we're doing with our military, but back then I was, I probably wasn't in the same mindset. And so that's how I would have gone out. I would have, if you could have airdropped me into Baghdad with a pair of boxing gloves and, boxer shorts, I would have said, drop me in, let's go. This isn't the life I wanted to live. But when I got that hormone deficiency corrected and my brain was clear again, my testosterone in the brain is the best antidepressant, the best anti-anxiety medicine. It's a part of what makes us, when we're young, feel like there's so much hope and potential for the future. And when we lose that, we lose a lot of ourselves. And then I think you stack on top of that happens naturally with aging, right? But the problem is what's happening in the world today, the toxins in our food supply, the glyphosate, the atrazine, this new EPA, pesticide herbicide that's coming out, which will be even worse. It's like they're trying to kill us. It's like they're trying to poison us, to diminish our health, and to make us fat, sick, inflamed, depressed, and quite honestly, just big consumers. I think a lot of people in the world, unfortunately, see us as a bunch of useless eaters, and they treat us accordingly. And they're treating our food as if it's something to diminish us, make us easier to control, bigger consumers. And man, I just want I want to make people hard to kill because people are trying. It seems like so many people are trying to kill us. I'm very outspoken about my dissatisfaction and the failures of the medical system. We spend way too much money on a system that gives way too few benefits. It's a sick care system, and it would be a cheap and easy transition to train doctors to be preventative and because when you damage the tissue, to stop the tissue damage before the tissue is damaged, you take somebody that's got, Alzheimer's, serious diabetes, lost a kidney, leg app, you don't come back from that. I mean, we got to prevent that stuff from happening, and it's not difficult. But they don't want us to deliver that message because it'd be a message that's like, stop eating genetically modified food. They are estrogenizing you. You see all these young men that are confused about their gender, trying to play on the women's teams. I'm sorry, but they grew up in the womb with someone that was eating way too much of atrazine and glyphosate contaminated foods. Their neurodevelopment is altered. And it's happening to all of us. And, anthropologists are commenting on it. And if we, so that message they don't want us to deliver, but that's a message I'll deliver every single day because it starts with our food. It starts with our diet. And, we have to counter that and the damage that that's been doing. And then, on top of that, it gets really hard if you're going to replace, that food, what are you going to do? Because it's not easy to figure out what's really organic and what's not. And for me, it became the only solution was to buy a farm, move out of the city, start growing my own food, raising our own pigs, chickens, grandkids and dogs. We have, 3 families, 2 of my daughters and their families have moved out there. And, my grandkids are going to eat real food, not this monoculture, heavily sprayed Roundup, atrazine, turn, male frogs into female frogs type of food. And so that's a long answer to that simple question, but that's the arc of my life thus far.
Yeah, absolutely. So you're speaking my language because at 27 years old, I was actually diagnosed as perimenopausal by a naturopath who said to me flat out, I would not hesitate to put you on bioidenticals at this point because my hormones had just flatlined, a long history of like Epstein-Barr virus and things like that, which then contributed to, essentially the complete annihilation of my hormone levels. I had virtually none, no testosterone, no estrogen, no progesterone. There was like nothing there. So then, fast forward, and by the way, back then I did write a book called Mind Over Fat or The Secret to Thinking Yourself Thin. And that book did focus a lot on making sure that you understood, what your hormone balances were, because if you're trying to lose weight and you don't, and you've got like this massive out of control hormone levels, then, in any direction, then you're going to struggle. Right. And so that's really something that I think is super important when it comes to, trying to get fit and lose weight as well. And ultimately, though, fast forward several years, I got COVID, and COVID did a number on my hormones again. So I'd love to know what you're seeing with all of that. Because for me, it was just a complete a rise in across the board viral titers, which we talked about last time, but a complete annihilation again of my hormone levels to the point where the only thing I could do, I actually did methylene blue to really help fix the mitochondria and the ATP production, which did help. But I'm still coming back from that. So maybe you could speak a little bit to what you're seeing now in today's day and age with that.
Well, number one, let's start from the premise that it's a bioweapon. It was a gain of function weaponized virus that should have never been created. And we still haven't held accountable the people that created it, but it was created to cause more damage and harm. And it does. And, once it enters the lungs and enters the bloodstream, because it's a bloodstream coagulopathy disease. And once it hits the bloodstream, it can hit any tissue that is rich in those ACE2 receptors. Well, ovaries, testicles, sex hormone production, these are big targets of that virus. And so you would see that in a lot of people as a significant, decline in their hormone levels and the post, and that contributed to the long COVID kind of picture too. I mean, I really think that most people that have a significant pneumonia, a significant infection, they'll have long-term, sequelae. I think the long COVID thing has been kind of boosted a little bit by those that want to exaggerate the risks of, kind of keep people in fear and compliance with getting this, the biggest mistake in the history of medicine, in my opinion, the injections, these gene therapy injections. It's the biggest mistake, and they're, covering up the evidence of it. That the only thing worse than the virus itself and the spike protein on that virus that you'll experience for 5 days to 10 days in the early stages, but 5 to 10 days is the potential of 6 to 12 months of spike protein exposure from a gene therapy that hijacks your intracellular machinery and starts pumping out spike proteins for months. Easily many times longer than that brief exposure from the virus itself. So the the biggest thing I'm seeing right now is not the long COVID. We have a lot of that. And it can, some of it is the attack on the ovary. Some of it is just, adding to the systemic inflammation that they are already suffering. You talk about Epstein-Barr, which is a very common, virus, latent, comes at, you get an infection, your immune system has to fight on multiple fronts. Here comes Epstein-Barr to, flare and put you back into that crushing fatigue and everything that, so you're fighting a war on two fronts. Your immune system is just overrun. And that happens all the time. Again, guess what's worse than the virus itself and the natural infection? It's having that happen from the injections, because these vaccines are causing exactly that for much longer periods of time, causing not only Epstein-Barr, but varicella and shingles and Ramsay Hunt and so many other things. But the long COVID is, again, it happens. Every time you have a major injury, it's not an overnight thing. It's going to take months. When you're young, it's a little bit easier to sustain, but it's always been true that as the older you get, the more fragile your health is, the more likely that pneumonia that 20 years previously you would have been fine from, but it could be it could really end you, knock you down enough that you never climb out of that, the hole that your health can be knocked into. But again, that's where I think it's about fragility, and the population is becoming more and more fragile in their health. Less, they're right up to the edge of the precipice of disease and destruction. And we got to move them back from that by, cleaning up the diet, targeted supplementation, get their hormones in check, get that microbiome functioning again, get their inflammation under control. In fact, what I'm talking about is I created a framework called Mindset. It's an acronym, MINDSET, for the 7 key elements of health, wellness, and vitality. The microbiome is the M in that mindset. Your gut microbiome is critical to your health. Every meal that has glyphosate in it destroys your microbiome. Stop eating anything genetically modified. And it's in more things than you read all in the label, because any vegetable oil, many of the additional things, anything that says vegetable oil, it's got glyphosate in it. Don't drink American beers and wines. They're, heavily, well, don't drink alcohol. I mean, do you really need it? I mean, maybe. Everything in moderation, including moderation. said Winston Churchill, but he was rationalizing alcoholism. But you know, be really cognizant of the dangers of some of these toxic molecules that are in your food. But mindset, M is microbiome, I is inflammation control. Man, so much chronic disease is driven by inflammation. You know, put out the fires of inflammation. Sugar's inflammatory, start there. You know, omega-3, high levels of high quality omega-3, curcumin, you know, eat anti-inflammatory foods. Anyway, that N is nutrition. So it's all about just trying to teach people how to eat better. D is detoxification. Most of my detox work is on avoiding it. You know, that's the best way. Know where the toxins are. Mm-hmm. And it's not just, you know, it's not just the estrogenic compounds and poisons in our food. It's like Wi-Fi. I mean, 5G Wi-Fi is a toxin nowadays. So know where these various toxins are. S is sleep, E is exercise, and T is total hormone balance. But I'll tell you, I usually start a consultation with a patient by getting some lab work, mm-hmm. you know, getting that sex hormone lab work, thyroid hormone lab work. And here's why, because the way I see hormones, if you look at the human body, there are receptors for your testosterone, your estradiol, your progesterone on every cell in the body except red blood cells. Hormones are like water to a garden. If you have a beautiful garden, but you don't water that garden, not only are your plants not going to bear fruit and bloom and flower, but they're going to wilt and wither. And that's what you see in the human body when your hormones diminish. For multiple reasons that we've talked about: viral attack, vaccine attack, you know, head trauma, etc., bad diet, you know, 5G, stop carrying that phone, especially boys. Stop carrying your phone in your front pocket, because those boys are hanging down there. They're kind of unprotected, but ladies, you know, just get that phone away from you. And because those signals. So all of those different things are attacking our body. And if we don't get those hormones to a level of restoration of health, where they would have been when you were 50 or 40, you know, 40 or 50 years ago, because that's not where they are. Some of your listeners might be old enough to remember Jack LaLanne, the original juicer guy. Mm-hmm. And Jack could, you know, in his 90s had a testosterone that was most, you know, 20-year-olds today would be jealous of. Over 900, you know, naturally, just from juicing, eating, you know, healthy vegetables. I don't think Jack could do what he did back then. He could pull boats across the English Channel by holding a rope in his teeth, you know, and as he swam the English Channel, and his like 70s, I think. I might be exaggerating that, but I mean, really amazing accomplishments when you live a clean, healthy life, eat well, etc. Be hard to do that in this day and age unless you were growing, and Jack would have. He would have grown his own, you know, fruits and vegetables and such. But we can do that today, and we've got to start doing that. I will tell you, as a part-time farmer, part-time pig farmer, you know, gardener, I've never loved life more. There's something amazing about nurturing and watching those, you know, those pigs grow from little piglings, and the chickens from eggs, and watching the grandkids chasing all of that stuff all around, you know, getting up in the morning on the weekends and not going to an iPad or a computer or the TV, but going out and letting the dogs, you know, wrestling with the dogs and chasing the chickens. So, you know, it's just a better world. And I think we got to get back to that. And if we don't, I think we're heading to extinction.
Yeah, absolutely. I wish I could remember her name offhand, but there was just an interview Russell Brand did with an Indian woman, and
yes, I know who you're talking about.
And she was amazing, but she spoke so much about the need for us to really get back to, you know, very more, you know, simple lifestyles, like things like growing, even if it's just a tiny little garden, or having 2 chickens, or, you know, things like that, allowing for those little things to enter into your lifestyle, not just because, you know, they'll feed you, but because there's a number of other benefits to just getting into that routine and reconnecting with nature, which is so important. And isn't it true too that connecting with nature is also serves as a hormone balancer.
Yeah.
Right.
In so many ways. Yeah. And it improves your, your gut microbiome.
Right.
When you're growing your own vegetables, you don't have to wash them. I tell people, just shake it off a little bit. We all need to eat a little bit more dirt, as long as that dirt, because our soil has a microbiome too. And we've been destroying that with the pesticides and herbicides and sterilizing that soil. And that's part of the problem that we're all facing. The nutrient density of our food is diminished, but the soil microbiome has been destroyed, not in our garden, not in our land. It's we're kind of following that Joel Salatin, Polyface Farms, permaculture, sustainable farming kind of approach. And it's amazing. And it's beautiful. You like the pigs are terraformers, they turn, this is an animal that you got to respect, because they turn poison ivy into bacon. And it's amazing how they just clear our land and the woods. And it's just, what comes in behind them, because they fertilized it and rooted it up, and is beautiful. And then we seed it with some awesome, like turnips and other stuff. And we kind of move them from location to location. And what you get behind them and in return is this beautiful, lush vegetation that will feed them even better the next go around. And yeah, it's we're having so much fun with it. But we all can do it, whether you're in an apartment and all you got's a patio. Get some cherry tomatoes and start teaching your kids that a cherry tomato that's grown in good, healthy soil that ripens under the effect of the sun, both of those things aren't happening with the food you're buying in the grocery store. Your kids will learn that cherry tomato is like, man, it's like delicious. It's not like that kind of empty, tasteless stuff that you buy in the store many times. It's amazing. And they develop a taste, and it helps them to develop their taste buds. My grandkids love broccoli and cauliflower and Brussels sprouts and, tomatoes and all those things, because, it actually tastes good when it's not, harvested in nutrient depleted soil, not ripening under the effect of the sun, but instead it's harvested before it's ripe, and it's ripening under the effect of exotic gas on the back of a distribution truck on the way to the distribution center, and it's 90 days old by the time you get it. Now it's going to be, but that's okay, because now it's going to be coated with Bill Gates's plastic coating appeal. How good is that? I mean, I'm telling you, that's another, I'm 666% sure that anything Bill Gates has his hands on is not going to be good for humanity, period.
Yeah.
666% sure.
We are in agreement there. Okay, so this is probably a loaded question. It is a loaded question.
Yeah.
So what is the difference between male and female hormones? And, we do have, females have testosterone, males have estrogen. So what are we talking about when we're looking at, someone in front of us who's depleted hormonally as a male or versus a female?
Yeah, well, the two main, so number one, we all have the same hormones. You have testosterone, I have estradiol, progesterone, pregnenolone, DHEA, et cetera. All the intermediate we have all those together. The difference is the levels, the primary action of the hormones. So women have higher levels of estradiol at various times during the cycle, but they're all important to our tissues. The other big difference between men and women is the rhythmic rise and fall, the rhythm of your hormones. Women have a very complex, amazing, harmonious rhythm that usually takes place over about an average of 28 days. That makes it really difficult to both measure, diagnose deficiencies in, like the rhythmic rise in estradiol will be, when the first day of your menstrual cycle, the first day of bleeding is when your period starts, and usually 4 or 5 days. Should be painless, low, mild flow, no big deal. That's not what women are experiencing, and I can talk to why that it is and isn't. But from day 1 to about day 12 or 13, estrogen rises consistently, progressively to a peak on about day 13. if a woman is getting her hormones measured, and we're talking about real women, adult females, not this other stuff that they're, but if you're going to get, if an adult female is going to have her hormones measured, you really want to measure estradiol, and you want to measure it around the time of ovulation, because hormones are dose-dependent regulators of gene transcription. The level of the hormone in your body at any given time is a message to your DNA, and that message is dynamically changing. Your hormones are, as they're rising and falling at different times, different messages are being sent to your DNA. But it's estradiol that's going to signal the DNA to create receptors for all the other hormones. If your estradiol levels are low, you won't have receptors for all the other hormones. Many times I see doctors putting women on high doses of testosterone when they have no estradiol.
Mhm.
Now, estradiol is made from testosterone, but that conversion doesn't work real well with just administering testosterone, because it does have some antidepressant, it has many benefits in the human body, male and female. But without estradiol, neither men nor women will be able to receive the hormones. And then doctors say, well, I don't know what's happening. The testosterone levels look great, but you don't have any of the benefits.
Mhm.
It's because that doctor, we weren't taught this in medical school. I had to learn it, and there was no book to read on this. I had to learn it by going deep into the medical literature and seeing, thousands of patients over the last 30 years and figuring out that, oh, wow. I mean, they're right. In this paper, they talked about how estrogen levels are, changing DNA transcription, creating receptors. So a doctor sees this high level of testosterone in the body and says, I don't know why that's not working, low level of estradiol. And the answer is because they don't have the estradiol to create the receptors for that testosterone. So what you're seeing is all this unused testosterone floating around in the bloodstream, which is meaningless. It's like a bunch of, Antifa members milling around, doing nothing, not working. It takes, I don't know why I said Antifa members, but anyway, it's not without the testosterone not binding to the androgen receptor in the nucleus of your cells, it's pretty worthless. It's just floating around and creating secondary problems sometimes. Abnormal hair growth, you get some chin whiskers and hair.
Mhm.
You get misdiagnosed with something like PCOS. It's probably not, it's probably the estradiol deficiency that's driving the whole thing. You can't create the receptors, receive the progesterone, the testosterone, and estrogen, creates its own receptors. So the first thing you got to do is measure properly, the proper timing in context with what your menstrual cycle, if you're still having one.
Mhm.
If you're menopausal, postmenopausal, which is defined as its average age, usually about 51 in that range. But women are born with all the eggs in their ovaries that they're ever going to have. You're born with them. And then you release a few every month. Some of those will become beautiful babies, and that's what life is all about. And then one day you'll have grandchildren. So do it as much as possible and have those grandchildren to enjoy. But one day all those eggs will be gone. And then a very important control mechanism in your menstrual cycle will diminish. Your hormones will, but your brain will still try to keep sending messages to the ovaries to produce the hormones.
Right.
But your hormones will start to diminish, but the rhythm really doesn't. And you'll still produce a lot of these things. And it's not just about pregnancy. Some doctors look at the uterus as it's all about pregnancy. You don't need progesterone after you've gone through menopause. I beg to differ. Okay, God put those progesterone receptors everywhere in your body. You think it's just, it's not necessary at some point? No, it's always necessary. And it's about these hormones being in the right rhythm and the right balance.
Mhm.
So I like to show, I'm a visual teacher and visual learner. So I show them the standard menstrual cycle. Estrogen has this kind of biphasic curve. It goes up, highest levels on day 13, comes down. If there's no pregnancy, it comes down, then comes back up a little bit more to a secondary peak on day 22. So the first half of the cycle, first 14 of the 28 days, is all about estrogen. Testosterone is playing an important role there too. It's all about activity, cell replication, healing, repair. Progesterone is the kind of dance partner with estrogen. It's low in the first half of the cycle, but it's going to come in, especially if there's not a pregnancy, it's going to come in to give all the cells in the body a chance to rest and relax. It's going to arrest them in G1 phase of mitosis, so cell replication. It just calms that down. And here's the real problem that a lot of women are having is they have almost no progesterone. They have this big, powerful estrogen drive, not just from their estrogen. It's the synthetic estrogens that are binding to those estrogen receptors. And by the way, I'm in the camp that says that's what's causing all of the cancers. If you have a hormone sensitive cancer, ladies, the problem is not your estradiol. The problem is atrazine, BPA, glyphosate, et cetera. There's a competition going on for the receptors in your breast, your ovaries, the prostate in men. And that competition as we get older is more often being won by the bad guys, not your biologic estrogen. It's nonsensical in cancer treatment to block your hormones. That just increases the odds that one of the bad guys is going to be there. Raise your estrogen, as many of the leading cancer treatment centers are. Raise your estrogen, try to outcompete the atrazine, and you're not only will your breast cancer get better, but you won't lose your bones and die from depression and muscle loss and bone loss, et cetera. So anyway, back to this picture, the difference between men and women. This rhythmicity of women's hormones is critical, and it's not. And when we were replacing it, when we're trying to restore someone that has a long list of symptoms that goes from tissue damage like bone loss, cardiovascular risk, to depression and vaginal atrophy, painful intercourse, et cetera. When those symptoms are present and the objective low levels of hormones on the specific days are present, we have to consider restoration of those hormones to one form or fashion. Now, I'm a medical doctor, so I have the ability to prescribe some of these things. What I prescribe is only bioidenticals. And that doesn't mean that it's like, taken from, a human. I mean, it's from Mexican yam, and there's some synthetic chemistry that goes into it, but we can create a molecule that was 100% identical to what your ovaries produce for estrogen, testosterone, progesterone, et cetera, pregnenolone, DHEA. We can make those nowadays. And we shouldn't add anything else to those. That's what pharma does. That's what the medical establishment does. Ethinyl estradiol is not human estradiol. Medroxyprogesterone acetate. We've proven that these things, when metabolized in the liver, cause problems. So stop. I still see women being prescribed Premarin when it was taken off the market, in 2003. But we seem to, I guess these docs have a very attractive pharmaceutical rep that brings in great lunches and, concert tickets and convince them that, yeah, you should still, it was taken off the market, but let's still keep prescribing it. It just, confounds me what's happening out there. But the biggest thing the big epiphany for me, Erin, and I know I'm talking so long on this, I'm excited. Okay. This is my favorite topic. But the epiphany for me was, God humbled me many years ago in my hormone deficiency, dark time. I turned to God. In fact, I opened up the Bible my grandmother had given me, took out, looked, there's a first time I'd seen it since she gave it to when I went off to college at West Point. And I opened it up and it's about, baptism. And I called her and I said, Grandmother, I think I need to be baptized. And she started crying and she said, yeah, you do. Yeah, you absolutely do. So I got rebaptized. But it was during that time I turned to God and he delivered me, helped me with my health, restored my relationship. It was suffering with my wife. I wasn't a good father, wasn't a good doctor. I just wasn't a good human. I was just grumpy and mean and irritable. So when I got that, I got that fix, it changed everything in my life. I said, this is what I want to do. I want to restore I want to restore people's lives, relationships, careers, because that's what it did for me. And it was like fast, when you go from a serious deficiency in your hormones to, restoring it to something, it's a matter of weeks. And the central nervous system things are the things you notice first: better focus, better energy, less depression, less anxious, etc. And so, that's when I pivoted my entire career away from ophthalmology into functional medicine and the provision of hormone replacement therapy. But I got off track there. The epiphany for me was that I realized that I know less than 1% of the complexity of this system. God designed this amazingly complex system. And I know, we don't know 99% of it. And if we're honest, that is true of every system in the body,
Right.
And often what we think we know was fabricated and fraudulent, pseudoscience that was manipulated and contrived, what causes depression, the serotonin deficiency, of depression, Alzheimer's, all of the things I learned in medical school have been, a lot of them have been debunked, right? So what I realized was, when you don't know 99%, when you know less than 1%, you better just pay very close attention to what God created and try to just replicate that. Because, what scientists and doctors, when they dare to assume the role of God, they do the devil's work. And that is so true in hormones. When we just give you, horse urine estrogen, we give you synthetic versions, we give it to you orally, where it's going to have to be digested, absorbed, and metabolized in your liver. We're going to have to put a whole bunch into the liver to get a little bit out into the bloodstream. Right. So when you do it, all those you give just a same dose every day. Static dosing for hormones in men and women is nonsense. It's not what happens naturally in your physiology. Mm-hmm. So what I said is, okay, how can I replicate the rhythmic rise and fall of healthy females and healthy males? And, is anybody doing it? Well, hardly anybody was doing it. And there were a few real pioneers. Guess what? They were women that had, went into the medical system and said, wow, what you just did for me over the last months or years absolutely made me worse. And they were typically scientists, and not always doctors, but scientists. One was an anthropologist, T.S. Wiley, the creator of the Wiley Protocol, anthropologist, also like soap opera star on All My Children, I think, and, really genius level person. But biorhythmic dosing. So I started studying, and I know T.S. Wiley. I call her Susie because that's what she goes by. But she went by T.S. back then. Mm-hmm. So she wouldn't immediately disclose her gender. And so, because, we know that there are certain elements, and since I personally think, women are smarter, brighter, more powerful. We're just here to kind of protect them as males. But she's an example of that. And some sectors of, would have 20, 30 years ago, they would have, discredited her for being a female. Mm-hmm. And she loves that. And when she testified before Congress on behalf of compounding pharmacy, she destroyed the senators, and they tried to, ask her questions, but she's amazing. And so I studied all that. How do you restore hormones biorhythmically? And back in that day, it was like, a tub of cream with little measuring spoons, and you would change the amount each day to try to raise the hormone levels in the bloodstream. Mm-hmm. Nowadays, we have these little dispensers that are, little plastic dispensers that you twist the base on. Each twist of the base pushes out a calibrated amount of the cream, and we give you a dosing chart that says day 1, do this, day 2, this, and each day with, you get one for estrogen, one for progesterone, one for testosterone. Mm-hmm. And because each of those hormones has a different rhythm, and we can recreate the rhythms that your body and your brain, your ovaries, pituitary, since puberty was programming your body to create. And then we can recreate that. And then we have lots of customizability because I have yet to find two women that are exactly the same.
Right.
So you can change it, really fine tune and customize the dosing. And so the second month, day 13, we send you back to the lab to see how your levels are. I have found that. So on day 13, when you're 20, your estradiol might be 400 to 500 picograms per milliliter. But when you're, 60, 50, 150 to 200 might be, more than it varies from person to person. But about 150 is the place that you got to get to a peak of 150, not 150 every day throughout the cycle, but a peak of 150 on day 12 or 13 to create the receptors to receive the other hormones. You got to get estrogen dialed in first. Progesterone should be in a nice balance between the two. So you get the activity and you get the rest, you get the anti-cancer benefit. And then, testosterone peaks on day 15, you get frisky after ovulation, and that works really well. And you need the right amount of testosterone, not too much, not too little. It's, everybody has kind of a hormonal fingerprint, and we try to find what that fingerprint is. I'll ask questions like, what was your level of athleticism? If you were a gymnast, a swimmer, multi-sport athlete, your hormonal fingerprint is typically a little bit, your body is used to having a little bit higher levels of estrogen, testosterone, progesterone. And so we try to figure out where to start you and then dial it in. So that's women. And it's very complex. When it's done right, it's absolutely transformational. And we do it right. It's about listening too. I'm a good listener. I'm not a dictator. I think some doctors get confused. They're so close between doctor and dictator that they get confused which one they actually are. And so they do the dictator thing. But I'm like a coach. I'm like a, collaborative mentor, and I'm a good listener, much better listener than I used to be. And I listen to what those symptoms are. If the symptoms are negative symptoms are occurring around a peak level or a low level, whatever hormone is probably peaking or low there, that might be might be what we need to reduce or change in some form or fashion. Now that's women. Men are simple. It's a 24-hour rhythm. Yeah. Just like you always knew, men are simple, 24-hour rhythm, but they have a rhythm,
Right.
so, pellets, and this is true of men and women. Pellets, I did them. Pellets don't work. They create the wrong rhythm. Nobody has a 4-month rhythm. And you shouldn't have to have a lumpy butt from all the scar tissue after you've been getting pellets every 3 to 6 months for, a couple of years. But for men, you got to replace that rhythm. For me, I do a combination of extended release injectable testosterone, usually a minimum about twice, like 0.3 mLs twice a week. We use the long half-life, slow releasing injectable to raise the baseline. If they're, 200, we're going to raise them up, 6, 7, 800. And then to create the rhythm, transdermal cream applied to the skin, 24-hour duration, essentially, peak in an hour and a half after putting it on. You put it on in the morning, and just like that young man that would wake up in the morning ready to, hunt his food, romance his lady, build a business, etc. Men wake up with the highest levels of the day in their rhythm, and that turns on various genes. As it comes down to its lowest levels in the nighttime, early morning hours, turning on other genes, growth hormone production, melatonin. So when you restore that rhythm in men, you're also returning the genetic effect of the hormones to restore them in a way that most docs aren't, they're getting 80% of the benefit. Just doing injectable testosterone is 80% of the benefit. Now, I say all that, and I should also say I'm a former medical editor. I used to edit a medical journal, and I know how to read the science. And I will tell you, I read everything. I get alerts when a new publication comes out. I read everything. I think hormones are one of the safest things. Restoring and treating a deficiency It's one of the safest things that you can do. Prevents disease, doesn't cause cancer. In fact, I think it counters cancer, and I think I have the evidence, and I could present it in court and win that case every time. But you got a big industry that's trying to dissuade you otherwise, and a lot of it comes from being confused by the conflation of what is estrogen. Because in the medical literature, they'll call, and we complain about it all the time, but they'll say estrogen. The patient was given estrogen when it was ethinyl estradiol, or the patient received, this dose of progesterone when it was actually medroxyprogesterone acetate or some other, synthetic aberration. So when I read the literature, I'm convinced that what I'm doing for myself, for my wife, is I'm increasing the probability that we can still be, chasing the great grandkids around about 120. Not in a walker, not with kyphotic and 6 inches shorter than we were in our youth, but, vital, having a quality of life in our later years. And I can tell you, my oldest male patient is 99. My oldest female patient is 89, and they're amazing. The male got COVID, and it was 3 days of a flu, when all of his, he didn't have many contemporaries anymore. But at 90, and I think he finally retired a couple years ago, but at 98, he was still running 2 big businesses, amazing individual. And the female, the same thing, and I got to watch her from over about 14 years go from 60 pounds overweight and kind of, sedentary to doing the, she walks marathons, not just regular walk, but that fancy fast walk thing. she's a crazy amazing. And so that's, I can tell you risk, benefits, and alternatives all day long. We're being sold a load of manure about hormone risks. Yeah, sure. I would say there's risk from what medicine has done, what the pharmaceutical industry has tried to create with, other species of estrogen and synthetic versions. But when you restore and replicate God's design with bioidentical hormones, you listen to your patient, you customize it for your patient. It's not, we don't have just 3 doses. Hey, pick one and, take that every day. When you do it this way, you can restore a level of function, healing, repair that it's unbelievable. I've watched so many people, get, my wife included, look 10 years younger after a couple of years on hormone therapy, and it's are there natural ways to do it? There are, but they start earlier in life, and they start with prevention. You can't eat this toxic stuff that they're feeding us, and bugs and lab grown Bill Gates meat, that's guaranteed 666% sure that's not going to work. You got to start early in life. A lot of the times the damage has been done. Right. And listen, I think our reproductive systems, they've always been a point of attack by the enemy. Always been a point of attack. We've been seeing infertility sliding, infertility rising, fertility sliding into nothing. There's people that these neo-Malthusian, Machiavellian monsters and sociopaths, they think there's too many of us on the earth. And, I know it's kind of conspiracy theory, but I just think there's people that just don't want us here, and they want more of it just for themselves. And I won't mention any names, Gates, and others, but that's just who I think I was put here to fight against that. I want to make people hard to kill so we can stand next to Jesus on the fields of Armageddon and win that 1,000 years of peace against our enemies.
Yeah, absolutely. As you mentioned, I just wanted to reiterate, I do think, prevention is becoming much, much more difficult in today's era. We're bombarded with so much toxicity across the board, and, it's impossible. You can live on your own farm and grow your own food, but that you can't control what happens, next door to you, even if it's,
True.
100 acres away. So
Yeah.
ultimately, we're all affected by all of these things going on in our environment. So we could talk for probably another like 3 hours at this point, but I do want to get to, I want to let everybody know. So now with the Remedy Revolution, I have implemented a very cool feature. So if anybody's familiar with James Lipton, just a little bit of backstory. I grew up wanting to be an actress. So I used to watch Inside the Actors Studio all the time, very consistently. And one of my favorite parts was he always starts every interview with a series of rapid fire questions. So Dr. Jim Meehan, you get to be my guinea pig.
Okay.
All right. If you could choose only one natural remedy for the rest of your life, what would it be?
One natural remedy. Okay.
Yes.
Maybe pregnenolone, because it's the grandfather of all my sex hormones. If I put a little bit more water upstream, I get a little more downstream, and it's what keeps me speaking and thinking and my memory good. So pregnenolone is my answer.
All right. Tell us something most people don't know about you.
Most people. I'm a member of the Martial Arts Masters Hall of Fame. I'm a 5th degree black belt in Taekwondo and a long time martial artist, thus the pituitary trauma.
So you're a ninja, right?
Part-time ninja. Yeah.
If I were to compile a playlist of happy music, what song would you suggest be added?
Happy music. Oh, what's my favorite song? Okay. This is not going to sound like a happy song, but it makes me happy. It's The Sounds of Silence. I love the original Simon and Garfunkel, but there's this group that does it called Disturbed. I think they're like a heavy metal band. And when they sing that Sounds of Silence, I love it. It's just gives me chills. Yeah.
Awesome.
The Sounds of Silence, but by Disturbed.
Awesome. What's your favorite guilty pleasure?
Guilty pleasure. Playing computer games with my grandson.
Awesome. I do a little bit of that with my son. So
awesome. Yeah.
What's the most influential book you've ever read?
Oh, the Bible. Yeah. I mean, no question about it. It's the Bible. And it's so good. I read it every day and I get it. Yeah. And I try to go through it every year and I get more messages and more learning every time I go through it.
Awesome. What does the word revolution mean to you?
Revolution. Yeah. To me, revolution is, it's necessary right now. It means a radical like transformation in some broken system. Something's broken and the people have got to rise up, to fix that. There has to be some radical transformation of that broken system or we all die.
What does the word remedy mean to you?
So remedy is, to correct to bring some kind of correction to an error, a fault, an evil. And remedy is just, it sings. So your remedy revolution.
Yes.
I love that. Yeah, that's perfect together. That's perfect together. That's exactly what I said about revolution. You're correcting an evil. It's an evil, an error and a fault. Okay,
yes,
I love it.
Yes.
Well thought out.
All right. If you could impart one piece of wisdom onto our listeners, what would that be?
You can't do it all by yourself. You're never alone. Just, reconnect with your creator. He's right there with you. God is right with you. And we don't use that. We don't pray enough. We don't ask for healing, and we should be doing that. So don't let the secular world deceive you. The enemy running this world, don't let him deceive you into believing that God is not real. He is so real. He is, and he will manifest in your life as he has mine when you really love him and believe in him and just have some faith.
Absolutely. I love that because, if I did this alone, it would be quite boring.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah,
Awesome.
but the enemy does want to isolate us,
Yes.
Once
Yes.
us isolated.
For sure. Well, everybody, thank you so much for listening. You can find Dr. Jim Meehan at meehanmd.com. Thank you so much, Dr. Jim. It is always a pleasure. I really hope we can do this again, and
absolutely.
see y'all next time. Take care.
Part of the revolution.
With hope as a guiding light, through darkest days we'll fight the night. With a whole lot of passion, with a whole lot of truth, remedy revolution is here for you.